13 News Now at 6 is back, and joining me this evening to talk about today's historic announcement from President Biden is our political analyst, Leslie Caughell from Virginia Wesleyan University. Leslie, we appreciate you coming in on a Sunday. I'm curious to know what happens to all these delegates that have already chosen to back President Biden.
Well, it's not clear yet, and what we'll see in the next few days is the DNC letting us know what the policies and procedures that they're going to lay down are for replacing the candidate on the ticket.
Today, we heard from President Biden saying he backs the Vice President, Kamala Harris, and has thrown his support behind her. We've seen others do the same as well. So what's standing in her way?
Nothing at this point in time. I don't think there's much of a stomach in the Democratic Party for a convention fight, and you've certainly not seen anybody else quickly say they're stepping up to kind of attempt to challenge her in any way. So as we see more and more political leaders in Washington and more people in the Democratic Party leadership fall behind her, I think we can be more confident that Kamala Harris is going to be the nominee.
And we've seen some of those leaders in the Democratic Party really in the last week ratchet up the pressure on the president. I mean, we had Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi all speaking with the president. I mean, we all knew the turning point might have been the debate for a lot of voters, but was the turning point for the president hearing from some of those top Democratic leaders?
I'm certain it was, and Democratic leaders were looking at polling data that didn't look good before the debate, didn't look good after the debate, and really worrying what presidential coattails would mean, whether or not Biden on the top of the ticket was going to drag down other Democratic candidates in down ballot races. If you couple that with the fact that there were a number of donors and bundlers, people who gather money from multiple donors at campaign events, had said that they were no longer going to raise money for Biden or Democrats until they replaced Biden on the ticket, I think the writing was on the wall.
Well, we know money talks, and I want to talk about money coming up in just a minute because that's important, the campaign cash, and you mentioned the down ballot races. I want to ask you about Senator Kaine. That's all coming up here in just about 2 more minutes as we continue this conversation with Leslie. 13 News Now at 6 is back with our political analyst, Leslie Caughell. Let's talk about the considerable amount of money that the Biden-Harris campaign has already raised. What happens to that cash right now?
So most campaign lawyers are saying that they're fairly confident because Harris's name is on the paperwork that money can easily be transferred to her. But I think there's a very, very good chance that we're going to see some Republican campaign lawyers mount a challenge to that and essentially tell us that before Biden is actually nominated by the DNC at the convention, that money is not his and cannot be transferred to her. So the courts will probably adjudicate that question.
So you're saying because this is so unprecedented, the Republicans could take advantage of this and throw in some legal challenges? Absolutely.
We don't know. We've certainly never seen this in the modern context.
Right. Let's talk about some of the down ballot races. I think about Senator Kaine being one. He potentially faced a tough challenger in Hung Cao here. And are Democrats like him breathing a sigh of relief now that an unpopular Democrat is off the top of the ticket?
I'm sure they are. Biden's popularity was sitting in the 30s. It was incredibly low. And one of the things that we've seen is Republicans have overperformed on the ballot when President Trump has been on the ballot in the past. So just a generic Republican you would expect to perform a little bit better as a result of President Trump and how much he excites and kind of makes enthusiastic the Republican voters. So I'm sure that those campaigns are feeling a little bit of relief knowing that kind of at least they're not going to be attached to a candidate that's as unpopular as President Biden was right now.
Leslie, final question. As a political science professor, you're a well-read student of history. What are the history books going to say about President Biden?
You know, I've heard historians call his presidency already transformational. I don't know if that's going to be the word that they use, but I think it's certainly inarguable that in a short period of time, he's passed a lot of difficult legislation and major legislation in a pretty tightly held Congress, and one that has a lot of instances in which you've had Republicans in key positions that have been able to block legislation. So we've seen climate change legislation, gun control legislation, infrastructure legislation, semiconductor legislation. All of these things, I think, are going to mean he's pretty positively remembered in terms of how he governed.
Leslie, we appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you. We'll be watching it closely. An unprecedented situation, no doubt.